Welcome, everyone, to the Illuminated Mind podcast. My name is Matthew Brownstein. I'm the founder of the Institute of Interpersonal Hypnotherapy and one of the lead instructors there now. This, again, is the Illuminated Mind podcast. I'm happy to welcome my guest, Cara Bradley. So welcome, Cara.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we spoke recently, and let me read your bio and then talk about why I invited you onto the show. So Cara Bradley is a leading authority of mental fitness, having led thousands through her signature body first strategies, including mindful movement, flow state, and nervous system training, and gut brain optimization. She is the author of On The Verge, Wake Up, Show Up, and Shine, and founder of the award-winning Verge Yoga Center. Cara shares her decades of mental wellness and performance training with organizations and premier sports teams, including the MLSLA Galaxy and Villanova University men's basketball. She creates mindfulness courses for wellness brands, including mindful.org, Muse, Insight Timer, Round Glass, and Happify. She is the host of the mental fitness podcast, Daily Whispers, and in 2020 was named one of the top 12 most powerful women in the mindfulness movement by Mindful Magazine. So I'm happy to have one of the top 12 most powerful women on the show. Glad you're here with us. So yeah, we were talking, we connected, and we realized we have interesting perspectives on how we approach wellness. I come at it from the mind first, right? Mind is really the essence, and you seem to come at it from the body side of things. So I wonder if you just want to start there, talking about your approach to wellness. Tell us about you. Let's start with that. Who are you, and what do you do for people?
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you for that intro. My background really comes as an athlete. I was a skater, professional figure skater and rollerblader. And I spent most of my life just in my body, moving my body and understanding how to compete and train to compete from my body. And so as I progressed in my own inquiry of my own, personal practices, it always came from a body up approach. And I went on to open a yoga studio. I ran the yoga studio for 16 years and have always taught some type of physical discipline and also mental disciplines when it comes to competition and performance. So I think for me, I certainly completely respect the mind first approach. And I'm certainly not saying there is one way because it's a two-way highway. But I do feel that our body kind of gets it's second rate when it comes to thinking about our own mental wellness, mental fitness. So I just am put on my pom-poms as the cheerleader really for the intelligence that is streaming through our body all the time, and how to really become fluent in the language of that intelligence, of sensation and impulse.
I'd love to go more into that, how we become fluent in listening to our bodies. And you also focus a lot on the gut-brain connection. So how does, maybe you could blend the two in, your next response to me here is, how do we listen to our bodies and why is the gut connection so important?
Yeah, so that's a big question. I'm going to start by sharing that when I developed the methodology for my yoga studio, Verge Yoga, it was really about how can we settle busy minds by moving and breathing the body. And so oftentimes in meditation lineages, there's a talk of the body mind, synchronizing the body and mind, right? Synchronizing in a way that the two are working hand in hand. There's a synergy and a coherence to it. And so when I was developing this yoga methodology, I recognized that if we were to move the body rhythmically, breathe the body in that same rhythm. So there's this synchronizing of the body and mind through breath, movement, and rhythm. What happens in a matter of 10 to 15 minutes is that the busy mind starts to quiet down, and the body mind, the person just feels more awake and aware.
Mhm.
And so my investigation, it's been, I've been a teacher for decades now. And my teaching, especially yoga, has been like a laboratory for me to finesse and to experiment with how do we allow for people to have this direct experience of what we talk about in mindfulness as calm clarity, where the body is calm and the mind is awake and clear. And so I'm getting to your gut brain question is because I've spent so much time understanding how to regulate the nervous system, that when I started to learn about the gut and the gut brain connection, and really the gut as the almost basement of our body, if you will, and the information that's coming from our gut through our nervous system and immune system up to the brain, it's like this whole new territory, and the science is fairly new. I mean, the Ayurvedic yogis have known this for a long time, and traditional Chinese medicine have known this for a long time, and even functional medicine practitioners. But now we have Western science saying, yes, our gut health, and because of the information that's coming from our gut, and I'll get into that in a moment, our gut health directly impacts our mental wellness, our ability to be focused, our ability to feel happy and joy, our ability to stay motivated, really is rooted down in the gut. So for me, as this, nervous system regulator, if you will, I've spent so much time there. To go down another layer, I feel like in many respects, I've been living in a house. I didn't realize there was a basement. And then all of a sudden I found the trap door to the basement, which was the intelligence from the gut. And it really blew open my work in a big, big way. So I can get into a little more of the details about the gut-brain axis, but I just wanted to give you this overview of how I journeyed all the way down to the basement.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you going there. I do want to dive deeper into the gut because again, we have possibly different perspectives of how we approach it, although my background is yoga, very well still is, I still practice daily. So I'm like fully with you. And in the hypnotherapy model, when I talk about, if I were to bring up the gut, I might say like, well, in this lower region of your body, like maybe your third chakra area, you've been bearing a lot of emotions. There's memories and negative beliefs that are stored there. So if I said gut, and having a background in Chinese medicine, I look at how the emotions are affecting the organ systems. What do you mean by gut? Are we talking about like the amount of probiotics in the system? Are we talking more physical, or are we talking that there's mental, emotional, or energetic blocks in that area?
Well, I think both, but my area of investigation has been more on the physiological gut microbiome. And I believe that we've been calling our gut the second brain for a while now. And in many scientists are actually starting to call it the first brain. But what we understand from gut brain science now is that we have something called the gut microbiome, which microbiome really is like an ecology, and it lives in our lower intestines. In most of it. And the gut microbiome is this ecology of bacteria, viruses, and other non-human entities that we can't even get there yet. We're really still very busy on bacteria for the most part. What we're learning now in research is that these bacteria, and there are thousands of strains of bacteria, you can call them probiotics, right? That may be easier for some of you to understand. There are thousands of strains of these bacteria that all have specific purposes that we didn't know up until the last decade. And we can now trace some of these bacteria to certain illnesses and to certain remedies, if you will. So when our gut is imbalanced, or what's called in dysbiosis, it's just a fancy word for saying it's imbalanced, there may be more unhelpful bacteria than helpful bacteria. We're going to have it's going to wreak havoc on our physiology. And so we've got the gut with all these bacteria and viruses. And what we know now is that 90% of the serotonin in our system is produced in the gut. 70% of, so serotonin being a feel-good neurotransmitter or hormone, right? So we've got serotonin in the gut, dopamine, 70% of our dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter really helping us stay motivated and excited about life. Norepinephrine, 70% of that is produced in the gut, and that is for focus and attention and staying on task. And then GABA, which is a hormone or a relaxation hormone that helps us to have that calm out of the calm clarity we spoke about before. So what we're learning, and I'm not a scientist, so I can't get into exactly how it's all happening, but what we do know is that when we have a healthy gut, all of those happy hormones are flourishing. And then we go up the chain. Now we've got the highway between the gut and the brain, which is primarily the immune system. So if there's inflammation in the body, which a lot of us have inflammation, that communication channel is going to be more staticky. And then we have the nervous system. And a lot of our vagus nerve, which many of you may know as the wandering nerve, kind of starts up in the head and goes through most of our organs and actually goes down into the gut. So we've got the nervous system as a major highway. So whenever there is stress, which most of us have, right? Maybe there's poor food choice, even just one meal. Environmental toxins and pharmaceuticals can all throw off the delicate balance of the gut microbiome and the signaling between the gut and the brain. So when I learned about this as a yoga and meditation teacher and performance coach, for me, it was a huge light bulb that went off, because having trained people every day for, a decade, I just have recognized that, we know what to do, but we still can't get ourselves to stay consistent or to do it or to go long enough or to be curious enough. And I'm like, why? And when I realized that for most of us, we have a lot of static in our system. So that clarity that we're all seeking is actually, in some ways, deterred by our physiological state.
So no matter how much yoga or meditation you do, and of course my field is hypnotherapy, so we're working to get the mind clear directly, I would imagine no matter how much we optimize it, like you came into it and said, well, I've been doing yoga, but there's this whole gut thing I didn't realize is going on. It almost seems like no matter how much you meditate, if you got issues with your gut, you're just not going to be at the highest level of functioning. It's like you talk about people having beneficial behaviors, like why don't they do it? In the hypnotherapy model, we would talk about the subconscious mind, right? A mind below conscious awareness, yet the body is the subconscious mind, right? And if there's this imbalance in the gut, then obviously no matter how much we do, we're not, even if we're motivated to do it, we're not going to function as well. But I hear you saying even improving the gut would improve motivation. So I guess my question is, what do we do about this? Let's say we put the science aside, we just agree with you, we believe what you're saying. What do we do to improve the gut?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. And I'm so thankful that you just said what you said, Matthew, because that was my aha. There's no amount of yoga that one can do. I mean, certainly it'll reduce stress, which will improve the environment. But if we've got static in the body, and most of us do because of stress and inflammation, there's just not, we're going to be living with like a 3G communication system instead of 5G. And so starting at the gut level, like I said before, there's 4 ways that this ecology gets thrown off and imbalanced: stress, food, environmental toxins, and pharmaceuticals. So I am from the school that it's food first. I mean, if we have the most control over what we put in our mouths. If we can eat a diverse diet. And oftentimes it's said, eat the rainbow, eat 30 different types of fruit and vegetables a week, and you're going to be feeding all those bacteria an array of different types of prebiotic fibers. So that's like the easiest thing we can do, is just get really clean on how we're eating, limit, we all know, limit the sugars and flours and processed foods, and stick as much as you can to that rainbow. So that's the first thing. And then we have stress. And as you and I have both dedicated our lives to, is really to help people understand how to not manage stress, but actually just become resilient to the stressors that are out there, because it doesn't look like life is slowing down anytime soon. I mean, the speed of change just continues to accelerate. So how do we, through practice, like we've been teaching, help people to maintain more autonomic coherence? This is a word I like to use, which is really when our nervous system is in balance and we feel relaxed but awake. So stress is the second. And then, of course, the other two, environmental toxins and pharmaceuticals. I mean, sometimes we just can't help it. We're certainly, I'm not here to say, to tell anybody what to do, but those are two other things that we can focus on to at least give the gut microbiome a good chance of flourishing.
And somebody like me who really wants to live, and I really do work to live at that optimal level of functioning. I live a very peaceful lifestyle. I eat impeccable, well, maybe not last week, but generally, generally impeccably well. So let's say somebody's like, well, I'm doing all this stuff. I even move somewhere where I know there's no environmental toxins or as minimal as possible. So if you're living the best possible life, how do you know? Like, I think I'm doing everything you're saying, but I don't know if my gut is optimized, and if I'm in true coherence with, if that's the right way to say it, with my gut. I know often the heart math people talk about so I'd like you to go deeper into coherence as well, because usually you talk about the heart brain coherence. Now you're talking about gut brain coherence. So I'd love to go deeper into that, but maybe the first question is, how do we know that we're optimized in that system in that way?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you my own story. So I wasn't sure. I did know that I was suffering from burnout running my yoga center. I mean, isn't that crazy? But it's the truth.
I did it too.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, when you're in the business, I always felt I had to hide and hold it inside. So I was suffering from my own version of burnout. And I was introduced to a company that has really been at the forefront of the science of the gut-brain connection. And they've formulated some very simple protocols that are specifically geared to improving the connection, the highway, the gut, and then the highway. So for improved cognitive functioning. And so, I've done a lot in my life to experiment and explore different practices and protocols. And so I gave this a shot. And within 2 weeks, this was for me the big aha. I felt my brain fog lift. I woke up one morning and I couldn't believe how crystal clear I felt. And I've been practicing meditation for 20 years, deep dives into, these practices. And I didn't know it until I was out of it. And I think that happens for so many of us, we're like that frog in the boiling water. We just don't realize the pressure cooker that we're living in until we're out of it. Go on an extended vacation or do something in your physiology that shifts things. And for me, from that day forward, I realized, wow, like there is so much that we could be doing at the basement level to be helping us all. So that's where I stand, is just helping to educate at this point.
Yeah. Are there resources? Because I'm still interested in this. All right, if I want to know how optimized my gut is, you mentioned company. I don't mind you offering a plug now, just so
Sure.
Myself and listeners, can know, how do we get better at this?
Yeah. And I think that we all just need a little bit of help. It's hard to do it alone. Like you were just saying, Matthew, you've got it, all those variables you've looked at, right? Food, environment, peaceful lifestyle. We can do as much as we can. And then a little boost every once in a while, to help us to see where we were is helpful. So the company is called Amari Global, the mental wellness company, and they've been on the forefront of research offering natural plant-based protocols based on Chinese medicine, based on Ayurveda and other indigenous practices to say, okay, how can we feed the gut microbiome the right things to decrease inflammation, to improve stress resiliency, and then to optimize the communication channel between the gut and the brain. So
Mhm.
I've been working with them for a few years, and there's also a great book out called Mental Fitness. It's about optimizing the body, the brain, and the biome. And
Mhm.
it's written by Dr. Sean Talbot, who is the chief formulator for Amari. And I think the book is fantastic because it really, from a very beginner place, really helps you to understand what we're learning in science and how the gut-brain axis works. And one thing that just came to mind that I learned about early on in my research is that in olden days, right? I don't know how many years ago this was. I want to say more than 40, 50 years ago, when people had severe mental disorders, I guess they called them back then, there was actually a practice of severing the vagus nerve down in the gut level,
Mhm.
which was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, they did that with hysterectomies, right? That whole thing was called hysteria. There's this
Oh,
mental condition, and they were removing the uterus. That's where the word hysterectomy comes from, as I understand it, because they were just thinking, well, we just have to cut this out, which is again why I started looking at it more from the mental side, saying maybe there's, quote, hysteria, because maybe there's past traumatic events. And again, I know that does affect the physiology, yet to not go too into there, because there's so much value in what you're talking about. If you're eating really bad foods, if you're in an environmentally toxic area, if you're stressed out, if you're filling yourself with medications, obviously your body's not going to function as well. And the body and mind are not the same thing, but they are intimately connected, right? Um, so yeah, thank you for the resources. So Amari Global, there's protocols there. And then the book Mental Fitness is a way to dive in. Can you talk more about the coherence theme since we touched upon it, whether it's why do you focus more on gut brain instead of heart math that's always talking about heart and brain?
yeah. Well, I think before I knew about either one of those, I was again very intentionally designing a way of moving and breathing bodies in order to shift them into autonomic coherence. So probably most people listening by this time understand our stress response. We've got the sympathetic response and the parasympathetic response, our sympathetic response being more of our fight or flight freeze response. And most of us these days are just sort of stuck in a chronically sympathetic state, only to maybe find ourselves in the parasympathetic state at the end of the day, after a glass of wine or, asleep. And so what happens when we actually balance our systems is that we're moving in and out of sympathetic and parasympathetic throughout the day, that we're not in this jacked up, perched state of attack all the time. And so when I started to develop this methodology of moving and breathing in rhythm and stillness and silence to help people become familiar with themselves in a state of relaxed alertness.
Hmm.
And, coming back to, meditation and mindfulness, we often talk about this state of calm, clarity, or relaxed alertness when we're both relaxed and awake
Mhm.
at the same time. And so when I started to develop these types of movements for people, I started to learn more about coherence. And that's when I learned about heart math, which is working at the heart level to evoke a sense of gratitude. And gratitude, we know, has a real physiological effect. And that helps the heart and brain to start to sync up. So if you think about coherence, I often think about just syncing, synchronizing or harmonizing the body, the brain, the gut, the heart. So the gut-brain coherence, I actually haven't heard it spelled out that way. So you may have coined a new term there, Matthew, which I like a lot, is again, just syncing up our systems for greater calm, clarity in our lives, or flow.
I didn't know we were inventing something. I thought you were referring to, it's like gut coherence, but you were referring to the heart-brain coherence. And yet in Chinese medicine, there's the three burners, lower, middle, and upper, called jiao. And the lower jiao is essentially the gut region. The middle is, the way I see it, is more the heart region. The upper jiao could be considered the lung region, but I see it very much as the head. So you have like the lower chakras, the middle, which is the heart, and the higher chakras. And really, they all need to be in coherence, right? You can't have the lower chakras out of balance with the higher chakras. You mentioned in talking points, quick, was your term? I don't know if this is spelled wrong, interoceptive, if that's the proper pronunciation. I'd love for you to explain that word, interoceptive awareness. And so, yeah, please explain that word. And then in that same bullet point, you said, and quick state shifting practices. So I'm very interested in the practices, like what do we do? But yeah, maybe you could explain that concept of interoceptive awareness.
Yeah, well, you said it perfectly. Interoceptive awareness is our ability to read our body's physiological states as information for what may be happening in the world. And I kind of did a long-winded way of saying is recognizing that gut tension may mean something in your environment, or throat clenching, or when your heart starts to race and you don't know why, or your breath goes shallow. So there are all these ways that our body speaks to us, like I said before, through the language of sensation. Those are some of the more obvious ones that people can relate to pretty quickly. When we want to tell the truth and we can't get the words out, our throat, or actually it goes through the vagus nerve again down into our throat, but our throat clenches or tightens. And so interoceptive awareness is a way of understanding the physiological changes in our body moment to moment, just like we would in a meditation practice start to notice the changes in our mind or thought patterns moment to moment. Our bodies are constantly surfing the different stimuli that are happening inside and out. So interoceptive awareness is that ability to become more fluent. And it's one of the reasons why I love the quiet movement practices like yoga or qigong, tai chi, or some of the other martial arts that allow for the mind to settle, where there's not a lot of external stimuli, and where you get to have a conversation with your body, with your breath, with the nuances that are happening. And so I think it's an unexplored area that I'm in love with, and I love teaching.
Yeah, the idea of listening to the body, like crucial. And yeah, anybody who meditates and stops and be still, you realize, all right, there's stuff in there. And a lot of people are afraid to do that, right? Who wants to sit with themselves when essentially they hate themselves? But again, that's going into the deeper mind part of it. I'm curious about, could you offer one quick shift technique that you had mentioned in that bullet point? What can we do if we're out of coherence? We stop, we listen to our body, we realize, all right, my throat's tight, my heart's locked up, my gut is not feeling good. What do we do?
Yeah, that's great. I call these mini win practices, and it's not to belittle them at all, because I think they're incredibly powerful for us. I often will teach them to leaders, that in any moment we can do a quick state check, read what's happening, make some few changes that I'll tell you about in a moment, to be able to step into a room more coherent, more open, more available. So oftentimes, we can just feel even if we're just not breathing, let's say you're about to get on a Zoom call and you're going to be asked to stand and to speak about something. And so before the meeting, your heart is like, you could feel it pounding out of your chest. What we can do, mini state shifter, is first, for some, just sitting and being quiet and still for even 2 minutes, research shows has the capacity to shift our state from a more alert, stress state to a more coherent state. For some people, silence and stillness doesn't work. It actually makes them more anxious. So if that's the case, then you can go outside and take a slow rhythmic walk. Rhythm is another understudied phenomenon, I believe, that has incredible capacity to shift us. In fact, Dr. Bruce Perry, he's one of the few out there that have researched rhythm. And he has said that rhythm can take us from a high anxiety state into a more balanced state pretty quickly. So even if it's drumming, if it's music that will just settle you, it doesn't have to be new age. It could be rap. If it's rhythmic and it allows you to find your ground and find your feet, then that is a really essential practice. So what we're trying to do is just move some of the body parts, if you will, into more balance, and that will help then for us to be more mentally clear and calm.
So if you could go for a walk, sit still, and listen to some rap music, you might be able to make that shift. But I can hear 3 things there, starting with go for a walk first, only because then you can get away and sit still. I know when I first started public speaking, I was 23 years old, and I remember that feeling, my heart beating out of my chest. I would relate that, as we're talking about, like, is it mind first or body first? I relate that very much to self-esteem. And I'm just curious to your thoughts, to look at it from the mind side of it just directly. Negative beliefs we hold about ourselves. So my heart was beating out of my chest, maybe, I don't know the exact specifics, but beliefs like, I'm not good enough, they're going to think I'm stupid, nobody wants to hear what I have to say, I'm too young, whatever those negative thoughts are. Is there anything from your model that helps to address that directly? Because no matter how many probiotics I take, right, or whatever I got, no matter how much I know how to sit and breathe, which I knew how to do at that time, I still have realized I've got a lot of subconscious programming that's causing my heart to pound. No matter what I do, that I'm always still fighting against that.
Yeah.
Any words of wisdom?
Yeah, well, I can offer my experience and also, I think a little bit of what we're learning about in the research. And I think it was Amy Cuddy who did that infamous TED talk about just power poses. And what I'll say to that, whether it's true or not, because I know there was a lot of controversy around that, is that when we are in a depressed state, that doesn't mean you're depressed. It could just mean you're in a down state. We tend to hunch our shoulders, all right? We're caving in at our chest. Our breathing gets limited, it becomes limited and erratic, and that will throw off the physiology and the nervous system. So to answer your question, I believe that our thoughts, and especially if they're repetitive thought patterns, like I'm not enough, I don't have enough, letters after my name, or I don't know what to say, or I never show up big enough, or any of those things. I'm thinking about some of my limiting beliefs.
Yeah, sure.
Is that I would imagine, and I just say that because I don't know if there's research behind this, that there are correlating physiological patterns. And I say that because having taught yoga, and many of my students I had for a couple of decades, and I saw their confidence, their availability change as their body opened up as well. So when you start to release the tension and the physiological patterns, it changes our breath, and the breathing changes how we think.
Yeah, certainly. And I couldn't agree with you more as far as having practiced yoga and meditation and Tai Chi and Qigong for years. that my personal transformation did have a lot to do with starting from the inside out, like the mind first, but also doing those practices. To me, it sounds like from the outside in, yet honoring how important that is, right? To stand even in like mountain pose in yoga or warrior pose in yoga, right? It's not just physiological, right? You're stepping into your power there and realizing you're stronger than you think and pushing your limits. So yeah, no, I hear you, and the value of both. I think in my field, I definitely, whenever I'm on a podcast, I emphasize focus on the mind. You have to heal the mind. Yet it's so important to remember, those of us who practice yoga in these disciplines, there's tremendous mental benefit from doing that as well. So yeah, thank you for those thoughts. I want to look at one other bullet point. You kind of covered here, how rhythm, movement, and breath can evoke coherence. Anything more you'd like to share about that, since that was the third main talking point?
Yeah, I think this is one of my favorites, really, is this whole idea of rhythm. I mean, if we go back to our babies, or when we were babies, how we were soothed was through rhythm. I mean, babies crying just, in child's pose and rocking themselves to sleep is a way of soothing ourselves and nurturing ourselves. And we did it naturally. So if you can find a way to integrate rhythm into your life, and it could be on an instrument, it could be on a walk or rowing or swimming or sweeping the floor. I mean, really, it does not have to be anything that involves money or equipment. We have the natural ability to find rhythm in our lives. Even just listening to the birds in the morning, something just so soothing as that, is listening to their rhythm. So I believe it, like I said before, it's under research, and it is extraordinarily powerful to help us come back into that steady, rhythmic brainwave, heart rate coherence.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, there's so many things that I use in our field, like in hypnotherapy, even just the pendulum back and forth is rhythm.
Yes.
We'll use a metronome sometime to induce hypnosis. Or I'm thinking of some music that I play. This is dun 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 dun. And yeah, so just finding ways. So even like for a lot of my listeners who are hypnotherapists, to get the rhythm perhaps in the music of our hypnotic programming recordings. Just even that alone might be a good tip. I would imagine with you coming onto podcasts like this, you have you're no longer running your yoga studio, I believe, but tell us where you're at now, or should people be reaching out to you? Their services that you offer. Somebody's like, oh my God, she could help me so much. What are you offering now that might benefit others?
Yeah. Well, right now I have a couple of courses out on mindful.org, mindful movement. I have a new course coming out at the beginning of 2023 on movement, and really on establishing new relationship with what movement means in your daily life. And I do represent this company, Amari Global, as an affiliate. So perhaps I can provide a link for you in the show notes. And then carabradley.net is my website. I do some individual mentoring, and I also do some group mentoring when it comes to body-mind practices, really just helping people integrate body-mind training into their daily life in a way that feels comfortable to them. I think there are so many ways that we can do this. And so I love mentoring people on helping them find their unique way to do it.
It's great. Thank you. Because there are so many of my students who approach it from the mind side. Like I'm always pushing, especially meditation, but I can't not mention yoga and Tai Chi. But I'm not sure how many of my students who are going through the hypnotherapy training actually end up doing that. Because again, we focus so much on the mental side of it. But yeah, you seem like such a wealth of knowledge resources for taking care of the physical side of it in a way that doesn't involve medications and going to doctors. It's much more holistic approach. So beautiful. Any closing words of wisdom? Anything you would share with any listener to perhaps benefit their life from last words?
Well, I so appreciate you and your expertise and the approach that you take as well. I think, we are multifaceted gems, and there's so many different entry points. And I think the important thing is to investigate and get curious and play. And some things we can become proficient at, and some things we can dabble in. But I certainly have been a meditator for most of my adult life. And so it's not just a one-way highway. It is a two-way street for me as well. And I couldn't have come to the body first approach without deep investigation of my own mind.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate your wisdom, and yeah, that this talk emphasized the need for both, right? That, you started with the mind and realized, hey, the body's pretty important here. And yeah, when you started, you're just like, I was thinking, no matter how much I meditate, if my gut is out of alignment, I'm going to be fighting against myself in that way. Or if my gut is perfectly healthy, but my subconscious mind is filled with negative beliefs, negative emotions, negative memories, I'm fighting against that, no matter how perfect my gut is. So thank you for the dialogue. I'm sure it was quite beneficial for anybody listening. And yeah, I look forward to connecting with you again.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you, Cara.